I am Richard Lusumbo, and I have been an activist or working within the sector of LGBTI rights and SRHR for over 8 years now. Um, I have had an opportunity to work with communities on different aspects, been at the forefront of the public health or ensuring that our community is considered, or issues around their health are considered. But also strongly I must say that I have grown into this role by working at Sexual Minorities Uganda, where I was until the end of May 2020. So you can imagine I have been working my journey from 2012 at SMUG, and at the end of May I moved into another new role, which is now I'm working at the continental level because now I joined Pan-African ILGA as their new programs manager. I usually like to say that I'm a cocktail, even with my education, because I've been like different things. I studied all my high school and primary from Mbale. So I grew up in Mbale, and I did all my high school and my primary education there. And I joined university at Uganda Christian University, UCU, and I studied a Bachelor's of Science in Information Technology. And I graduated in 2011, and after that, immediately my graduation, I volunteered with SMUG in August until December 2011, and then I started working officially with SMUG as the researcher, um, and ever since then, like things moved on. When I started working at SMUG, I gave myself a time frame, and when it reached 2016, I thought it was important that I kind of grow my education, like expand and try to widen on my knowledge. So in 2017, I enrolled and started studying at University of Pretoria for my master's, and my master's was in Masters of Philosophy in Human Rights and Democratization in Africa. So I graduated the same year in 2017 in my master's, and interestingly, in 2018, I again enrolled for another program at Lund University in Sweden, where I also went in Sweden, did my first semester or modules, and then got back, and I continued my studies from here. And we're doing I focus on a research specifically on access of SRHR services for um, LGBTI members in Kampala and sex workers. Then I went and did my furthermore studies and exams in Cambodia in 2019, and I graduated in 2019. So again, I widen again my studies around SRHR and really understanding the global perspectives when it comes to global health, because again, those are things that I'm passionate about. And the reason why I said at the very start that I'm a cocktail, you can imagine, from IT, law, and then public health or SRHR. So, like, I'm a couple of things, and that's my education journey. I can't say that's the end of it. We shall see what the future holds. So, I didn't come out.
Oh.
I was outed.
Oh.
So in 2014, when the Anti-Homosexuality Act was signed by the president, I was one of those people that Red Paper outed on the cover pages. And I remember this cover page, which was reading, "Top homosexual comes out, speaks out how I became a homosexual." And it was such a big shock, for my family, my friends, because this is something that I hadn't discussed with them. One, it was a very terrifying moment. I remember everyone was like my close friends, my family were really angry, pissed, not because they were pissed at me, but the fact that they were getting that news from a tabloid. I received a lot of hatred messages from friends. I lost many friends. There were so many questions in the family, but I must say that at the end of the day, my family has been very, very supportive and very, very protective of me. So my father was very supportive when all this came out or when I was outed. Was protective of me, and he really did not castigate me. And while he did not even tell me, but in our home, no one was allowed to speak anything for or against homosexuality. And that for me was the greatest gift that I ever got. And I've had my cousins support me, protect me, my sisters, my brothers. And I must say that from that time, while that was Red Pepper's plan was to push me in a corner to hide and to be in despair, I learned and collected myself through that pain, and I turned that to something positive, which was I have been given this opportunity now to tell my story, and I cannot allow anyone else now to tell my come out story. And I got back that power, and ever since then I have lived happily and openly as a gay man from Uganda.
Okay.
For the first time creating the research and documentations department. It was always something that is in writing, in documents, but we do not have that really concretely like functioning. So my role when I was first hired as a research assistant, you can imagine at the junior level, I was able to attract resources that helped us to build a department, and it transitioned from just being a part that was not having resources into something that now actually had resources to do the research and documentation. And because of that foundation, in 2013, 2014, we did a documentary. And that documentary was very interesting because we were documenting the history and background of the LGBTI movement in Uganda. We were looking at that time also, now when the AHA was passed, then we started looking at what is the impact and the effects of the AHA, the fact that it was passed into an act of parliament and then it was signed by the president. And we went ahead to release a documentary in 2015, which was titled "And Still We Rise." And that was for me like a very wonderful thing. But also within that, my other achievement, building on to what I've just said, is the REACT program, the Rights Evidence Action Program. A program that looks at responding to crisis within communities and also documenting. Now, our movement has always suffered a lot of persecution, but we had always been struggling in terms of providing evidence, like showing and saying, when we talk about discrimination, this is how it looks like, this is how it is. So REACT, we partnered up with our partners in the UK, Frontline AIDS. At that time, we were documenting, and it all started around when AHA was passed. There were so many cases. People were being thrown out of homes, people were being denied health services, people were being beaten off the streets. And in the past, we would just go and document. But the community would say, now you document, I'm bleeding, and then all you want is just to document the case. So with REACT, it changed everything. We would document, but the most important thing was to help our community members get out of whatever danger it was. And for me, seeing REACT as a program that started at SMUG and being adopted in over 22 countries across the globe, I feel so proud that we were able to contribute to a part of documentation for our communities, not only in Uganda, but the rest of the world, and it's growing every passing day. So again, for me, that was like really huge. The other thing, and like I told you, like achievements, I can't just put one. I feel like, you know how you go for a ceremony and then you start naming your friends, or then you realize, hey, I'm going to miss out some people. So I don't want to fall short of that. So the other thing that really was how I see as an achievement is SMUG's public health work. Like SMUG in 2004 was founded because on the issue of health, because the LGBTI community was being left out in the programming and all the policy documents for HIV nationally, and that's how SMUG was formed, where everyone came together and that's it. So SMUG was founded heavily on a very strong health foundation, and so my part was to bring us back to that foundation, and I was heavily involved on issues around SRH, on issues around HIV, and really pushing and ensuring that SMUG's voice was there in all those spaces at the Ministry of Health, at Uganda AIDS Commission, PEPFAR, like working with CDC, USID to ensure that our issues are brought to the forefront. And for me, again, really seeing that SMUG has pulled itself into that position and working with other community organizations like ICW, like Helps Uganda, on the focus of community-led monitoring for PEPFAR programming and also Global Fund, and really pushing our voices. I feel like that's also my other achievement, that I can say, yes, I did this, I contributed, I was part of this process, and I was able to bring my organization to this level. The other achievement that I can also speak about is really bringing different movements together to speak with one voice on issues of health. And that voice is bringing sex workers, bringing PWIDs, bringing the LGBTI community together in what we now call the Uganda Key Population Consortium. So, given the fact that I have been at the forefront of that and bringing the communities together, I feel that has also been part of my contribution to the greater good, and we'll see how that goes, but I see it going to be something big, and but I feel that is also one of the achievements. But last, I also want to speak about this one, and it's about 2015. I was the coordinator for Pride.
Oh, yes.
And I think that's the last time we matched. And in 2015, it was such a beautiful moment. There was a lot of community involvement, community engagement, number of people who came out really like be out there. All events were participated in, they were all full, we never had any incidences. And also the other thing I must say, Pride 2015 was the most widely covered in the media, not only in Uganda, but across the globe. And for me, that was something that I'm glad and happy that I was part of, that helped us to tell our story as a community in Uganda, and I will always be proud of it. And I know, regardless of what we do, 2015 will always also be a foundation of us reflecting what we did then and how we move forward. And I don't say that and meaning that I don't care about what happened the other years, but I feel this is a part that I participated and I was fully, gave my every whole as a coordinator of that year. And so, yeah, and so in brief, I would say, yeah, that's my long achievement. SMUG has been like my family, my home, my everything. SMUG has grown me into the person that I am now. And even the organization, Pan African Yoga, where I am now, it was through SMUG that actually I got connected. So SMUG in a way has been contributing to my transition. In 2013, for the very first time, I was assigned to go into a consultative meeting for Pan-African ILGA in Johannesburg, and there were activists from across the region who were brought together to rethink what we really wanted for Pan-African ILGA and rebuild it and bring it back. So I was part of that process. And then in 2014, as a delegate from SMUG, I was elected on the board as the co-chair or alternate co-chair. And then after serving 2 years in 2016, I was, as a delegate from SMUG, I was again elected as the co-chair in Pan-African ILGA until 2018, when I decided to step down from the board and allow other people to really take course and really work there. So I think for me, I see a SMUG that has been always pushing me towards this role, supporting me to this role. But also the other thing that through SMUG, I have been able to learn how to interact in different circles. So be it community, be it working with donors, donor relations, be it working with the international community or the local community or the regional community. I have learned all those skills and I have practiced all this while I was still at SMUG. And I feel it is something that I carry myself with from SMUG into Pan-African ILGA. So I feel to a greater extent SMUG has always been preparing me for my role, and I still believe even my future roles. There's going to be a lot of changes in terms of how activism is done, how we engage as a community. I must say, when I joined the movement in 2011, 2012, it's not the same anymore. There have been so many changes. There have been so many other people who have come on board. There are different people who are speaking on different issues. And what I see as a greatest change is that we are going to be looking at levels whereby more people will be coming out. And I don't say maybe politically things would have changed or anything, but I think the kind of bravery that I see in the young generation lately, it's very promising. And I think for us to actually have that total fulfillment, there is need for the two generations to have to be in a conversation. Both the older generation and the young generation, there must be a conversation happening. We must not entertain any gap, because we must learn from our elders, but also we must support the young ones to come up. So that kind of guidance will really push us to whatever levels that we want to be, and there is no turn back, I must say, and there's going to be a lot of growth and changing. And as you can see, there are lots of organizations that are forming, but also there are different things that communities are doing without necessarily being in an organization. Yes. And I think for me that's the greatest thing that we must look at and be proud of ourselves, that beyond just Richard, there are a couple more people to talk about when it comes to the LGBTI movement, and there should be more and more of us at the forefront speaking, and I think that's something that's coming. One thing is that I have spent the greatest of my time working in the LGBTI community in Uganda, so that also gives me a chance of kind of really knowing the specific issues, and also knowing what kind of interventions that might be needed or required. And that will help me in my thinking, and also working at Pan-African ILGA. But also the other thing is that the fact that I have contacts, so it's much easier to also always come back and consult. And I think that kind of connection is very, very important. And it's the same thing across the continent. I have links and connections across the continent, and I feel whatever programming we'll be doing, it not necessarily be focusing on Uganda alone, but I think it will be a program that contributes to the wider liberty of our LGBTI movement on the continent. I think it creates a very good one. It creates an opportunity for someone else to take up leadership for the consortium, because then I must also concentrate, because there are many activities that are going to be coming up, and I can't say that I will be able to do the two roles forever. So one, it creates an opportunity for someone to come up and take up that role. But two, I think it really puts us in a better light that as a community or as a key populations in Uganda, we are producing excellence that is attracting attention across not only Uganda but also the region or the continent. So I think there's something to look up to, which is really great. But also the most important thing is that being transitioning fully into Pan-African yoga, it also means that now there's also an international regional reference that I'm creating. So I feel like there's a lot to look up to, but I think it's for the best. As I spoke earlier, among my achievements is that starting up the Uganda Key Population Consortium, and as its founding national coordinator, is a role that I've continuously been playing and coordinating the different communities, sex workers, LGBT and PWITs together. And it's a role that I love and focus on because it gives me an opportunity to contribute not just only to the LGBTI movement but also other marginalized communities in Uganda.
Okay. The Ugandan movement does not have many internal political conflicts. How have you managed to steer clear of these?
I think one of the key things is knowing what your role is. So if you know what your role is, you'll be always above it. Because my focus here is I focus on research and documentation, I focus on public health, I focus on movement building. So that's it. And also another thing, I have tried as much as possible to separate my work and my social life. So you don't find me hanging out with most of my colleagues I'm working with at the workplace or activists, but rather I'm also giving myself an opportunity during my social life to socialize with other members of the community. And I think that's also one thing that has really helped me to stay afloat of all that, because I do my part and that's it. So anything else for somebody else, that's their business. And I'm one kind of person who doesn't want to be in other people's business because I also don't want them to be in my business. Yeah. It's very important that mentoring or mentorship happens at both generations. The older generation mentoring the young generation is really, really important, because that's how we shall sustain our movement. That's how we shall sustain our community. And I think there is need for more dialogue to be happening. But also I think organizations should be conducting activities or should be working on programs that facilitate those conversations, that help the young people to be involved. That if we are doing programs, there must be, we should also look at meaningful youth participation and meaningful young people's participation, so that at no given time shall we have a gap here or a gap because we do not have somebody to stand in that position. I think regionally it's going to be, now I'm transitioning into that, the fact that I'm Pan-African yoga. So I see myself really contributing at that level. And like I hinted on, who knows, maybe I'll be furthering my studies. I haven't decided what that's going to be looking like. But I think I see myself working so much both on the regional and the international level, but also ensuring that the regional international work is directly contributing to the national strategies. I think we are there, and the conversations have started around decriminalization in Uganda. And this has been because of the different interventions, like strategic litigation. For example, the Victim Kasa and Oyo versus the Attorney General and others on the right to privacy. That case opened us up for courts of law in Uganda to declare that as LGBTI people, we have our right to privacy. like boom. The case of the late David Kato and others versus the Rolling Stone, again, that case opened us to an opportunity to know that the media houses cannot just go around publishing information because we're LGBT. So the fact that we've been having that strategic litigation happening, including when the Anti-Homosexuality Act was signed into an act by the president, we went to court and it was dismissed. So even when the Constitutional Court did not discuss on the merits, like the rights, human rights for LGBTI people, that was also a clear foundation. And I think it is those gains that we build on. And also, before, like the discussion, like let's look at the president. And in the 1990s, he was saying, oh, there are no homosexuals. If there's any, they should be arrested and be killed, you know? And then in 2000, he's giving interviews, and then he's like, oh no, we have always had homosexuals in our society, a small fraction, but we've never persecuted them. So the president is an older man, but he's also been transitioning. And for me, it's those things or small gains that help us to see what the future is going to look like. When it comes to the issue around decrim again, conversations around LGBT were like a non-starter. But now, if you post something on social media, the debate will always be 50-50. Those who are against, those who are not. But before, oh my goodness, the hatred was just too much. But we have also been finding our way in terms of creating spaces for community change. And I think our liberation and total decrim is going to come about when we start to have a total mindset of communities. And I think that's where we have a greatest role to play. If you look at all countries that have been decriminalizing, like Ireland, it was the communities, the population that said, you know what, enough is enough. We must ensure that LGBTI people have their rights. It's the same thing in Australia. It's the same thing you see in America of this world. And this has been happening because communities and attitudes change. And I'm seeing that kind of conversation happening. And I think that's going to be a way of bringing ourselves closer and closer to the conversation around decrim. Wow, it's been amazing. For me, returning in this role as the programs manager has been exciting, and like I mentioned, I had always been at PI. I've contributed, I've worked in different roles. So for me, going back, it's been really extremely exciting. For the last 3 months, it's been wow. I'm learning and I'm trying to set up and work on different things with my colleagues. Very wonderful team that I'm working with. And I must say, I'm just looking forward to what the future holds for us. For me, one thing I would say to the young LGBTI community members is that you have a role to play, and no one should ever tell you that you're not deserving or you're not worth. And everyone has their own different come out story. My come out story cannot be yours, but find your niche and find ways of actually speaking your truth to your friends, to your family, and your community. Start small, and if you have access to education, please, I would encourage that you study. And if you have no access to education, I think there are various ways that we can also change our lives by looking into the employment sector. Let's start up things, let's work on something. And that's the only way we are going to change the perception of our society. If we can have more voices, people in the business, people in law, people in education, in farming, that's one way that we're going to be seen as citizens who are contributing. But also, I'm not saying that we are not, but I think we must operate in a society whereby we know people attach value to certain things, and I think let's play into that for our liberation. But also in organizations, I think there's need to work together, build synergies. There's a lot of work, so no organization can say they can take it all, but I think working together is something that I would call for, not because that organizations are not working together, but I think it's important that we are reminded on that. And just also want to call upon leaders to have dialogues more, speak to each other more. I think that also will help in terms of how people plan for communities, because then they learn from each other and they support each other as leaders. And I think we should heavily have this conversation around young community members and older generation.